Hi. Yeah, okay.
Any luck? It's okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Perfect. All right, I'm gonna start the slideshow. All right, cool. Well, thank you guys. Great to be here. Really enjoyed so far the presentations. Yeah, thanks Mickey for the shout out for Entourage. Really enjoyed always your perspective on DAOs, and also Jade and Aisha for your perspective on digital fashion and Phygital. Also some topics that I'll be chatting about today. So my topic is quite large and it's also quite future focus. So I suppose keep that in mind during the presentation that these are things that we're building now, we're figuring out now. They're not things that have currently been set in stone. So yeah, so a bit about me. I definitely have a lens of a designer. I'm American, but I've lived in London and New York, and I'm now, like you said, Alex, based in Paris. And so I came here to work in luxury houses like Saint Laurent and Loewe, and really came with like the dream of working in luxury. And I mean, I think a lot of us have had similar experiences, maybe during COVID, kind of caused us to step back, reevaluate how do we want to move forward in this new space that's very digitally integrated as well with Web3. So I came across Web3 and digital fashion about a year and a half, 2 years ago. And really when I saw it, I became really inspired and re-energized with my perspective as a designer. And so I've worked in production. Sorry, I have my Telegram, I can't figure out how to turn off the notifications. But it's like I work in tech and I still can't figure this out. But yeah, so worked in production, worked in design in these different spaces, but I kind of kept noticing there's two problems that I kept facing as a designer or on the technical side. And so in fashion, I feel we have a long way to go in two perspectives. The first is how do we create product? Right now it's disposable. We don't know where it comes from. There's a lot of waste. So how can we use Web3 and use technology to improve that process? And the second is the structural organization of companies, of fashion, right? That's like what Mickey was touching on. Right now, it's very, hierarchical. It's quite difficult to enter. I have been really lucky to have opportunities to go to these big cities and try to work in these companies, but I know a lot of others don't because it requires a lot of investment, a lot of time. And so how can we just make fashion more open as well as digitally integrated? So this is a big mission. It's a big vision, but this is where we're starting with at Entourage. And so we began about a year and a half ago, and we are a DAO-led Phygital Fashion label. And so I'll start to break down kind of those two things. First off, like what is Phygital? What does that mean? And then go more into the DAO side. Though keep in mind, right, these are both really big topics. So I'll just go through an overview. So the first is about this idea of Phygital. So this is, I think, very new that we think about owning digital goods at the same level as something physical. So for example, like these earrings that I'm wearing, these are an example that we did with Jevels, with Entourage back in October. And I basically wear these earrings on my Zoom calls and I value them more than my physical ones. So I can see that there's already an opportunity to transition for this perspective of starting to own digital like you would physical. And so for me, I still think there's three spaces where we create our identity. The physical, right? We're very aware of this. It's something that we have to improve, but still quite understandable for most consumers, right? The second would be like this augmented space. So something like augmented reality. And so this, we are still quite far, I think, right? We still, like you try in a filter, it's not quite matching to your face, it glitches. So we still have to technically advance on that. And then the third is digital. And so that's right, more in the metaverse, something that's really like a hot topic. So, but I think, right, we still have a long way to go for that to be fully integrated into our lives and as consumers of fashion. So a little bit more specific on what Phygital is. So there's a lot of different ways to define it. And that's why I think it's also really interesting to have this crossover between the physical and the digital. So Momentum Agency in 2013 was pretty much the first to define this. So they just said it's the concept of using technology to bridge the digital with the physical. And so, I mean, that's quite broad, but we're already starting to see examples of this. For example, digital twins is a really, I would say, a good way to start for a lot of brands to create a product in the physical space and then put it in the metaverse, or do the other way around, create a digital NFT that then, for example, can launch the pre-order for your manufacturing. So lots of opportunities, I would say, with Phygital, while we're still waiting for the metaverse really to be fully integrated into our lives. And so, as I started to mention, Altarage is a emerging DAO-led fashion label. So we're a fashion label first and foremost. And what we do is create collections that are physical, augmented, and then in the digital space. And so here's a couple of projects that we've done previously. I should also add in the one with Mickey from ArtSect in here. So about a year ago, we launched our first fashion film that was about the integration of activism of e-waste into a digital space. And so we were really one of the first to kind of combine this idea of activism and fashion and digital. And so we were showcased in Paris at the Aswa Film Festival. Also, these earrings have been traveling around. We were showcased in New York Times for those with Jevels. And right now we're currently working on our first LTL, larger than life metaverse collection, which is soon available on our website as like an NFT. So something that's really specific to us is this idea of metarality, which is a word I made up because, you know, if there aren't words already existing, let's make some up. So it's this idea of the three spaces that I described, combining the metaverse, the augmented, and then the physical realities. And not only that, but how can we take our products and adapt them in the most sustainable formats, in corresponding ways with utility. So this is more of a visual of like what I mean by that formula. And so our LTL collection, so this is what we're about to launch, is the digital space. We are working with Style Protocol, who helps to give that utility in Decentraland and Roblox and different metaverses. So that's where we start. And so after that, we'll be working on the ORL collection, like these filters, for example. And then finally is the IRL, the physical, making sure that it's really, you know, a sustainable circular supply chain, which also will take time to get manufacturers and consumers kind of on a new system of pre-order or made on demand. So like I mentioned, the IRL, this is the physical. So basically only making when there's a demand. And so that's something that NFTs can really facilitate. So you, for example, can test with your users what is the most popular products. You can then mint them, and then when someone purchases it, can trigger basically a made to order production. And so that's what we're setting up. It takes a lot of different players to come together, but we're finding a lot of interesting people to start to work on that to begin our physical. And so for the ORL, the on real life, here are some examples of filters that were also showcased with ArtSect. And so this is really, like the digital layer on reality. And for us, we do something that's more like a textural basis, that kind of like a digital embroidery. And so it also kind of helps to mitigate some technical barriers that you face around matching different things to your head, to your body, since we're still quite far to having something hyper accurate for filters. And then, like I mentioned, the last, the LTL. So creating really like crazy larger than life pieces and putting that on an avatar in a metaverse to really explore identity in a way that you can't physically. So yeah, I think I'd say this formula, it's really about using products by format and by utility, ideally in a more sustainable way to create our identity. So that is the first big topic of Phygital, what it means to us, how we're developing our collections. And so it's definitely a new approach and a different one, more that is modular versus trying to kind of make digital twins. And so then it brings to the question of, okay, like, how do we do that? Like, how do we come together and create these collections in a decentralized way, which like Mickey was saying, like, there's still a long way to go as far as legislation around different types of Web3 technologies, integration of blockchain with voting. Like, there's so many elements that are within this system, but we are still starting and moving forward with it. So a big thing for us, and really why I started Altourage, was to use digital to improve the physical. And so that's really like a mentality that we all have within the DAO, within the collective. And that's honestly how I've met a lot of the people on my team. Like, it's happened quite organically. And so starting with values versus, right, just sales, which is obviously still needed, but has brought together a really interesting combination of people, diverse people who are coming from tech, from activism, from creation, designers. And so how do we now start to organize ourselves in a way that is less hierarchical, but still organized in a way to deliver collections and create product in accordance with our formula? So this is basically how we're structured. We're divided into kind of like 4 groups. And so if, for example, someone wants to join us, you can enter our Discord. So this is right now on Twitter. You can just grab the link there. And so you can kind of start to explore these 3 or 4 different spaces. So the first is more the studio, where we're creating the products. The second is more the community, where we showcase, we speak about them, a connect, right, with the DAO outside. And then the lab, where we have like this tech support, because what we do is really technically integrated. And then the fourth, not necessarily within the DAO, but still a very important component, is the collector and the user and those who are experiencing the products. So this is, I mean, a diagram of basically how we function. And so those who are in the DAO begin as a member, and then you have an opportunity to kind of gain through contribution different levels. And so I think hierarchy is not necessarily a negative word. I think it's more lack of transparency with the organizations. And so, because we still have to kind of, right, organize in ourselves and still have those who lead and help to facilitate, because problems I've had in the past with DAOs are just like, onboarding is confusing. And so we're trying to figure out how can we simplify that. And so basically there's kind of these 3 groups that we're launching projects within. And so that's how someone could get involved. So like I mentioned, these different kind of profiles. The first is more around connecting, around doing events, around spaces, coming together to write more in like the social media, and also a bit more short-term kind of contributions. The second would be collecting. So trying out the pieces, wearing them, exploring like where they could fit in different places, and also kind of giving access to future events and experiences. The third is this idea of like creating and collaborating. So that takes more of a form of like short projects. So like something like ArtSect, right? We collaborated DAO to DAO. So that provides an option to have a more short experience with the DAO versus something more long-term. And those who are in the DAO are more there like on a consecutive basis, whether it's weekly in meetings, contributing time, but then learning and then exchanging with a really interesting group of people. So yeah, that's a lot of information, I'm sure. But if anyone's interested to join us or just learn more about us, you can join our Discord. The link is in our Twitter. I think Altourage Label is our account. I then would advise you to join an event. So our next one is on Monday. I put the times here, 8 p.m. My time in Paris. And then the last would be to apply for a project, and we can explain more about how that works in one of these calls. So thank you guys. Hope I didn't run too long, but pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Lauren.